Module 8, Objective 3, discuss refraction, accommodation, and visual acuity. Just to review some of the anatomy associated with the eye, we know the eye is divided into three distinct layers or tunics. We have the fibrous tunic, which consists of the sclera or white of the eye, as well as the cornea, the anterior portion of the eye, which is clear. Next, we have the vascular tunic. This is the middle layer. And there are a number of structures here to include the iris, which is the colored portion of the eye. In the center of the iris, there is an opening called the pupil. Closely associated with the iris is a muscular region here called the ciliary body. It consists of the ciliary muscle, which I've just outlined, as well as the suspensory ligaments, the ligaments that attach to the lens. The remaining posterior portion of the vascular layer or vascular tunic is the choroid, and this is the layer that brings in the vasculature. Lastly, the innermost layer is the retina, and we can see the retina would be represented in this general area, and there'll be more to say about that shortly. Refraction is the bending of light, and the bending of light or refraction occurs at the cornea as well as the lens. So if you consider the cornea, as light hits the cornea, the shape of the cornea helps to bend those light rays, and the point of refraction is to create a focal point. This is going to be a particular point at which all those light rays are then focused. And the focal distance is defined as the distance between the center of the lens and the focal point. And astigmatism is a pathology where the light passing through the cornea and the lens is not refracted or bent properly. And this causes a distortion in the image. Accommodation, our eyes, certain portion of our eyes can actually accommodate and help refract the light properly. So accommodation is an automatic adjustment of the eye to provide clearer vision, and the lens is a major accommodator. Through the ciliary muscles and the suspensory ligaments, the lens can be changed in terms of shape. So the lens becomes rounder when you're trying to focus on nearby objects. But as you focus on items that are further away, the lens will become flatter. And again, it's the ciliary body, this muscle and the suspensory ligaments, that ultimately change the shape of the lens in order to allow for accommodation. As we age, the lens becomes less flexible, so it's less likely to be able to accommodate. And individuals who have to start utilizing bifocal lenses, for example, do so because of this problem. Two major pathologies associated with the eye is nearsightedness and farsightedness. Myopia is nearsightedness, and in cases of myopia, the focal point occurs well before the retina. So in fact, once these rays focus at this point, they're going to start bending out again, and that creates a problem with our vision. And this is generally caused when the eyeball is too deep or the resting curvature of the lens is too great. The image of a distant object is projected. Actually, the focal point is in front of the retina. Therefore, the person will see distant objects as blurry or out of focus. Hyperopia is farsightedness, and this is where the eye is too shallow or the lens is too flat. The ciliary muscle has to contract to help focus even a distant object on the retina. And at close range, the lens cannot provide enough refraction to focus an image on the retina. So really, it's both hyperopia and myopia are a product of anatomy. and it really depends on the shape of the eyeball. If an eyeball is too long, you end up in a myopic state. If it is too squat or short, you end up with a hyperoptic state. And of course, we use lenses, either whether it's contact lens or regular eyeglass lens, to help accommodate these pathologies. And we can correct them pretty well. Images arriving at the retina are miniaturized, and they're upside down and they're reversed from left to right. This is just a common feature of refraction. You can see here in this figure you have a telephone pole, and as the image of this is projected onto the retina, it is not only upside down, but then it's backwards with respect to left versus right, so it's reversed. Visual acuity is a clarity of vision, and the standard rating that we utilize is 20/20. Anything that deviates from that is less than clear. Scotomia occurs when you have a permanent blind spot, either from compression of the optic nerve, damage to the photoreceptors, or the central damage, just depending on where the damage occurs. But that is a permanent blind spot that some folks get. There are two main types of photoreceptors. Rods detect the presence or absence of photons, while cones provide information about the wavelengths of photons. Photons being a property of light. Both rods and cones have two main segments. There's an inner segment that contains all the regular cellular organelles that you would anticipate belonging to a cell, and the outer segment contains membranous discs that contain visual pigments. Visual pigments absorb photons of light, and it's the first step in photoreception. They're derivatives of rhodopsin. So you have the protein opsin plus retinol, which is a pigment that is synthesized from vitamin A. Here we see the anatomy of some of these. We have the inner segment here. Again, normal organelles associated with any cell, like the mitochondria and the Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticula, the nucleus, so on and so forth. And then we have the outer segment, and this is where we have those membranous discs or plates that contain the actual visual pigments. The outer segment tends to be closely associated with the pigmented epithelium. It's this epithelium that absorbs photons that are not absorbed by these pigments. And they also phagocytize old discs that are shed from the tips of these outer segments from these photoreceptors. Each photoreceptor synapses with a bipolar cell, and that's pretty much the retina. Color vision is provided by cones. Blue, green, and red cones exist, and what differentiates these cones are the types of opsins that they have. Color blindness is the inability to distinguish certain colors. And there's different types of color blindness, really depending on which cone is absent or reduced in numbers. Once photons of light hit the eye, what occurs is bleaching. Rhodopsin molecules are going to break down into their components, retinol and opsin. And before that particular molecule is ready to be utilized again, it has to be recombined. And this is an active process requiring both ATP and time. If you've ever looked up at the sun, you have bleached the photoreceptors, the rhodopsin molecules within your photoreceptors, and that takes time and it takes energy in order to put those pieces back together so that could be utilized again. So after staring at the sun for a period of time, if you look away, you will have a blind spot, or you'll have definitely an impaired vision because of bleaching. Night blindness is the result of a deficiency of vitamin A. And of course, carrots are a rich source of carotene, which can easily be converted to vitamin A. And I think it's pretty common knowledge that carrots are good for sight. And this is really where that comes into play.